participate and engage, and still have it be okay for the people who've been there for years and years, even decades, because this community is about 26 years old, and not feel threatened that they're going to get pushed out or there's too much change or whatever. So growth, definitely, like some other people said, the business part of it, definitely, and then just more youth and joie de vivre.
Okay. A few things going on in Victoria. Lots of hats. Thank you. I'm so happy you're here. And anyone who's ever tried your cupcakes know that food ministry was a spiritual experience. So yeah, don't ever knock that. How about we hear from Stephanie? Stephanie?
Hi, everybody. Stephanie Stewart. My home center is CSL Greater Dayton, Ohio, USA, where we have processes and not processes. I am currently a senior ministerial student, and I wear a bunch of hats. I'm the youth director, which is probably one of the bigger reasons that bring me here. I did not choose to be the youth director. When I was hired at CSL Dayton, I was voluntold. That having been said, I've grown into it. I feel like the module I'll tell you that I'm most interested in looking at this list is module 8, which is community growth through social and business outreach. I'm in the midst right now of closing my own business after 16 years. And so this is like a very emotional time for me right now. But seeing the way CSL Greater Dayton functions is very non-business. And I see gaps where we could step in places, and some of the things that are being funneled to me now are more social outreach in nature. And so I think that's probably where I am headed, at least as long as I stay in Dayton. So all of the modules look really great, but that was the one that jumped out at me.
Okay, thank you. Alan, how about for yourself? Here, I'll unmute you.
Sure, thank you. So Teresa, who's also on this group, and we both have a pretty long background in business. Teresa in particular has an entrepreneurial background. And one of the things that we're trying to do for our local community, the CSL Metro, which is in Arlington, Virginia, right across the river from DC, is to try and expand our outreach. It's as a couple of the other folks on the line have said, people come and go. We don't really have a defined program for how to, connect with people who just wander through. We have, various initiatives out there on social media for getting the word out. It is a pretty small community, but we're both of the very strong opinion that, and I'm sure everybody else on that line feels this way, that this is such a gift that we would like to, share it further. And so I think that is something for both of us. And then for me personally, the question, and this is really more a question than something that I found fascinating, was the title of the module, Being in Conscious Conflict, which is a very interesting title. It's somewhat evocative. It's similar to a group that I often meet with. It's a meditation group, which we call Conscious Contact. I know it's obviously an entirely different perspective and approach, but it rolls off the tongue in perhaps the same way. So that is something that I found fascinating. And then the whole idea of community growth through social and business outreach. That's an area where I see myself going in the medium term, shall we say. Involved somehow with CSL, but also, in an entrepreneurial kind of way. So I'm really excited about the opportunity.
Thank you. And perhaps we'll hear from Teresa then. Teresa, do you want to go ahead?
She's muted. I think Teresa's still muted, Sonia. I'm still...
Yeah, it's there. She's there. You're good? Go ahead, Teresa. Oh, Teresa, we can't hear you. We could hear you before, so whatever you had done was great before.
How about now?
Okay, go ahead.
So as Alan said, we are both we both go to the same center. It's CSL Metro in Arlington, Virginia. And if I just ask the question to my heart, like why am I here and what do I want to do? The simplest answer is I want to spread the good news and just to share this way of life with as many people as possible. And I think, I have a lot of different skills to offer. I've had my own business for many years. I'm an entrepreneur at heart. And in terms of the form that takes, I don't know if it doesn't really matter to me. I feel like I'm all in and willing to act on in a number of aspects, whether that be to help shore up our center financially, or the arrangement of chairs. I don't know. I mean, there's so many different ideas actually that I have going on in my head about how we can bring new folks in and how we can share this beautiful way of life. The other thing that is really important to me is just how do we have newcomers coming into our community? How is it that they can have the best experience possible and feel welcome and want to come back? So yeah, so that's where I am tonight.
Okay, great, thank you. Cassandra, are you okay to come forward?
Sure. Hi. I'm happy to be here with everybody. And I am living in Portland, Oregon at the moment. I am serving as a practitioner at New Thought Center for Spiritual Living. I just became licensed as a minister. And while I was in school, I was working as the director of community engagement at my center. And what that meant was I did like 10 full-time jobs on like a part-time salary. and essentially it wasn't sustainable. And after 2 years, I left that job and I took a break from my community. And I took 6 months to just recenter and finish training. And so now I'm all done and I'm not returning to my center on staff. That was my dream when I started ministerial school, to be there on staff at the center I was at. And it happened before I graduated, it happened previously. And so now here I am at this new juncture going, what is that? Like, where does that leave me now? And so what I'll say is that I have a really strong desire to think about new possibility for spiritual community. And what does that mean? And what does that look like? And what's sustainable? And what provides like win-win-win scenarios for leaders, for community members, for the mission? And how does everyone get fed by this and not just depleted by it? So this is really important to me to stay with it, but to look for different ways of viewing ministry, of viewing spiritual community. And I find that in general, I get very limited by what's already here. I find it really hard to think outside of what we already do. And so that's part of why I'm taking this program, to think into possibility, to be a channel for what could be next. And so I'll tell you, I'm doing a couple of things. I am talking with Reverend Z and Melissa about getting a letter of call through their virtual ministry and supporting them and then start working towards my ordination under their ministry. And at the same time, I have a dream to relocate to Vancouver, British Columbia. and to be in ministry there. So, you know, and what would that look like? I don't know. And I have to tell you that there's a lot of fear that comes up around it. There's a lot of expectations from my family who are all in the US who don't want me to move. And including my husband, who gets very fearful about it, which I totally get. And yet I'm wanting to stay in possibility. And that's why I'm here. So the topics that spoke most to me were about the consciousness of money and also about conflict, because I've found that I'd like to cultivate a consciousness of prosperity and enoughness in terms of creating community and being in leadership. And also I found that spiritual communities tend to get real weird around conflict because of we're supposed to be nice or something. And it creates codependency. And I'd like to learn how to step out of that in a graceful way. So yay! And I'm sorry I have to leave at 6 today because I'm traveling, but I'm glad to be here at least for part of it.
Wonderful. You'll be able to catch us on the recording. Well, there's no coincidence. You have a couple more people from BC on the call, and I introduced you to Karen Wilson in Vancouver. So you're on your way there. In one way or another, the ball is rolling. So good luck. I love that city. Now we have Reverend Laura on the telephone. Laura, are you able to do your introduction?
Yeah, I think so. Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Okay. So it's funny that Cassandra was just before me. I am a staff minister with Reverend Ziegloff and Melissa Felipe currently, but that's only going to be for about another couple of weeks because I just became the senior minister in St. George, Utah. I'm from Las Vegas, Nevada, which is about 2 hours from St. George, so that works well. I'm also co-director of a focus ministry called Awakening Mystics, Education for Transformation. Education has been my thing. I was a professional educator for over 30 years, and that's where my training is. And so I feel very comfortable in that area. I'm teaching for Holmes Institute right now, teaching minister as teacher, and I write curriculum. Home Office has contracted me to write curriculum for us, for all of us. And so I'm really strong in that area, but I feel like I'm very weak in business areas. So when I was talking with Sonia about this, it was pretty much a whole general area of business. The idea, the module of strategic planning sounds really intriguing to me because I think that's going to encompass a lot of areas within ministry. How do we bring people in? How do we keep them there? How do we get the money coming in? How do we do all of the different things that we have to do under that kind of umbrella? So that's kind of where my focus is right now with all of it. So that's who I am.
Wonderful, thank you. So Reverend Laura is also my practitioner, and this whole idea of the spiritual entrepreneurship came from a conversation we were having where I was frustrated at what didn't exist. And she said, well, what if you just created it and maybe people would want to come, like maybe I'd want to come, she said. And so there you go. Thank you, Laura.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Practitioners, wonderful about moving us past the angst, right? And so Reverend Jeffrey, how about partner in crime for Reverend Laura often? So how about we finish up with you?
Yes, we are. Hi, everybody. I'm Reverend Jeffrey Ryan, and I am now the Senior Minister and the Spiritual Director of Riverside Community Center for Spiritual Living. That just happened. Yeah, yay! That just happened officially a couple weeks ago. So I'm super excited about that. I'm currently living in Las Vegas. My husband and I live here. My husband, Ed, is also a practitioner, and we will be making the move to Southern California here in the next couple of months. We got to sell the house here and that kind of stuff first, but super exciting. I'm super involved in the neighborhood, in the city of Riverside. I've been doing a lot of community outreach in that area and really getting connected that way and participating in a lot of things. So that module I'm excited to hear more about, but and the networking I'm excited to hear even more about. But it's been happening quite naturally. We hosted a prayer vigil for families belong together back in June 24th, and that came together in 3.5 days, and we had 150 people there, and the Riverside Resistance Revival Chorus was there, and so it was a very successful event, and it took a lot of Facebook messengering people I didn't even know, and then them putting me in contact with more people, and it was like, and they told 2 friends, kind of like the shampoo commercial, and all of a sudden we had 150 people. So that's been an entrance point for me into Riverside, and so I've been very fortunate that way. I too am very interested in the strategic planning aspect of it for next month rather, because now that I'm everything at the center was after September 9th, when I was made, things were put on hold until then. I was in a consulting role for 6 months prior to this recent vote, but the vote was on September 9th. So everything was after that. Well, it's now after September 9th. And so now we get to really roll up our sleeves and get busy and get to work. So so I'm super excited about what's unfolding here with this program. Known Sonia for several years now, and I'm super excited to be in class and learning from this wonderful master. So thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. So this is us, guys, and we're going to go through the next 10 modules, the next 10 months together. So we are each other's colleagues in this spiritual experience of entrepreneurship, leadership, community, congregational growth. Everything that has been promised in the 10 modules, we'll move through this together. A little bit about your facilitator, that's me. So I come from a corporate background doing HR leadership, but really working with leaders as they're going through mergers and acquisitions. So I did that for about 18 years across 4 organizations. And so high change environments, I was away about 150 to 200 days a year working with organizations, using my witchy intuition, walking into organizations that we were going to purchase or buy or merge, and kind of seeing and feeling the things, and then having lunch with the directors of M&A and the vice president and the C-levels afterwards, and sharing the details on the business, and then sharing my feelings and intuition, which turned out to be pretty accurate from time to time. So we got a lot of work done and really did it fairly in some really difficult environments. So moving out of that about 10 years ago, actually next month will be my 10-year anniversary of being an entrepreneur, so an independent person myself. For a few years, I was an intrapreneur in this. So I had my entrepreneurial skills. I went to the Middle East and I was positioned as an internal person for the face of the organization. They were my client and I was being paid outside. It was through my business, but I was an intrapreneur, so that happened as well. I was also going through my practitioner studies and started my ministerial studies while I was working in the Middle East. And so when you're away from your complete physical environment of your spiritual center, and you're still this spiritual person. So I left Science of Mind all over that project in the US, and in the US, my project in the Middle East, and then coming back and going to the US for my studies, and being from Canada and going back and forth, just the opportunity through a lot of the changes that have happened in the politics in North America and in different social enterprise type of environments throughout the world, with physical and weather disasters, geographical situations. We hold this business of being spiritual no matter where we are, and we take it with us. So then when we go into a community leadership role, whether we're on the business administration side, whether we're a board leader, or whether we are a practitioner leader, or we're the ministerial leader, we're still being spiritual, but we're also responsible for the business. And I was speaking in Kelowna on Sunday, and I was saying this is like something that we just think sometimes shouldn't touch each other. Like they're supposed to stay apart, this idea of business and spirituality, and actually that sometimes we feel false. And then it puts us into all these different bypasses. So we all know this idea of spiritual bypass, right? So I'm going to suggest that there's many other bypasses, like pick a card. I'm going to suggest that we might experience, and maybe you can nod if you have this one, financial bypass in your community, conflict bypass, operational bypass, communication bypass, feedback bypass. Let me count the ways. You could probably think of a few others that exist there, but it doesn't do our communities its appropriate service, and there's a spiritual way to go about it. So let's start. We're going to move from our individual stories into the story of our community, and I'm going to share for that. So let me go back to, here we are. Okay, let me just move. There we are. I'd like you to grab pen and paper. It's a very good idea to have pen and paper around. And so just take a moment and jot down a few points, at least 3. What makes your community relevant? So let me extend on that. So what is meaningful about your community, your spiritual community, your center, existing inside the community or the geography that it does? Why does it exist? What makes it relevant? So just go ahead and right off the top of your head, take down what comes. Refrain from editing or judging or changing anything, just the top few things. What makes your community relevant? So you'll know that you've tapped into relevance when you think, if our community didn't exist, some of this wouldn't occur. And it might be helpful to think of some recent events, initiatives, experiences. Okay, I'll give you just a moment with that to jot that down. Okay. And so throughout the time that we're in the modules, the handouts that I send you ahead of time, if you can have them available online or on paper, whatever works for you, go ahead. And then I'll have you take down a few things. And after the modules, or after each module is complete, and I send you out the recording and you're preparing for the next module, I can send you a summary sheet that kind of helps keep track of the important things from one module to another that you want to take with you. So you'll see that come out from me as well. So what makes your community relevant? So I'm just going to open up the dialogue here just for a quick moment. Look at the list that you have. Put an asterisk next to the thing that's most important. Like if that didn't exist, then your community would definitely feel that, your wider community. And I'd like you to just do a shout out here on the one important thing, the most relevant, the thing that makes your community most relevant. Okay, let's go ahead. Stephanie, start. What's yours?
I don't have anything.
Okay. Cassandra?
I wrote down 2 things, but in answering that question, the deeper question, what wouldn't happen if we weren't here? We talk about being the best kept secret in the area. We've been here 72 years.
Yeah.
There's
Okay.
no secret here.
Okay. So there isn't one thing that stands out, and that's important because that's what you caught. Okay, Cassandra?
Yeah, and I find it hard to answer these questions since I feel like I'm in between communities. However, I decided to answer this question on Oh My God Life, because at least that's a potential of where I could serve, even though that's not official yet. But the thing that I starred in about Oh My God Life is that it extends Science of Mind principles outside of a church setting.
Okay, thank you. Lesia?
I am with Stephanie. I don't know.
Okay. And that's absolutely fine. That's valid. That's why I'm asking the easy questions first, right? Leslie?
In a very conservative city, we are a place of acceptance for all gender expressions, all religious origins, all nations of origin, Phoenix has been a tinderbox lately between Mexican immigrants and South American immigrants, and legalized equality in marriage. And very often we hear people say that this is the one place they feel safe and they know that they're accepted.
Thank you. Actually, I'm going to piggyback on that with Reverend Karen, just to see if there's anything that you want to add or is different, since you're one wall apart.
Right. Well, that was my number one that had the star. That's very much, we are a safe place. I called it a safe place to heal. I really feel that is the main thing. That's what I experience. That's what I feel. So I'll go to my second one, and that is the invitation for spiritual growth. I think we do a great job calling in people and hearkening back and inviting them in all so different ways for their spiritual growth. And that would not happen if we wouldn't be here.
Okay, thank you. How about Tammy?
Mine was similar to what Leslie said, that we're pretty much the only alternative to mainstream religion and fairly conservative mainstream religion in this area, which means that we are the alternative that is inclusive, that we are the alternative that does honor all paths, that we are the alternative that teaches spiritual tools and ways of understanding our spirituality and our growth and transformation that other mainstream religions don't teach. So, and that is just within our city. Within a half an hour, there are more alternatives, but people tend to stay very close to the community here and don't partake of those if they're not very close by.
Okay, thank you. And Reverend Jeffrey?
So the one that I marked as the most right now is, right now we've been doing a lot of work with the immigrant population. We've been doing work with accompaniment and actually going to the detention centers and visiting detainees and walking with them in accompaniment. And so this is one of our social outreach opportunities. And so there's not really a lot of faith congregations doing that type of work right now. And actually we are working with a community organization to create that work, to create a larger network of faith communities in the Riverside area. So we're building that network. So without us doing that, it wouldn't be happening. So.
Okay, wonderful. And so we've got Alan and Teresa who'd like to go first about your community.
I'll go. Can you hear me? Okay, good. So the thing that comes to mind, that came really quickly, is that we're in this really cool, hip, urban setting. And I think that we have an ability to appeal to people that might not be really interested in traditional, in a traditional church community. And you know, they may be interested in a setting like ours, and I think it's, you know, we can be a church for people that don't go to church, kind of, yeah.
Okay, Alan, would you like to join on to that?
Point, and on similar to that, we're right across the river from Washington, D.C. The Pentagon is in our town, as an example, and you know, a number of other defense entities. So, as you can guess, there's a lot of that type of energy around us. And by the same token, though, our town in particular, and particularly the area where our center is really quite, at least to the extent possible, given the surroundings, rather hip and urban. And we find that people are reaching out and they're interested in non-traditional church experiences, the whole idea of mindfulness and spirituality. It's for whatever reason, it resonates with people. And so that is, I think, where we are starting at least to have some kind of impact on what's around us.
Thank you for that share. I did mention when I was speaking on the weekend that it's never been more ripe a time in the world for us to be out in environments we wouldn't normally have stepped into before. And my particular area of ministry involves business. And I think that the business community and even the so-called corporate community in business, the really strict kind of appearing business community, is ready for us, and they're calling us in, because although they're not comfortable to use the word spirituality, think of the words that are showing up: mindful leadership, conscious business practices, conscious leadership, collaborative communication, conscious conflict, change that's compassionate, all these words. And it's almost like they're saying, help us, come and help us understand how to do this, and still feel good about what we're doing, and to not cause damage to ourselves and others around us, our employees and our community and our customers. So there is this, I can't even say it's an undertone anymore. It's really quite prevalent, and we're being called in. So there is a perfect timing in us gathering here today. And speaking of the business piece, I'm going to go back to Sharon. We're going to hop over to the idea of entrepreneurship and what spiritual entrepreneurship means. Just take a moment here. Okay. So what is an entrepreneur? So we may have had some ideas about what an entrepreneur is. I consider myself an entrepreneur. Anyone else here on the call consider themselves an entrepreneur already? Yeah, in straightforward business, I am. So a definition that I liked for an entrepreneur is that it's a person who identifies a need and starts a business to fill that void. And in 2008, when I started my own business in Toronto, there was a lot happening because of the recession. So I started a meetup called Be the Change Networking. And we had over 500 members at one point at the height of things, because there was such a need for people wanting to do business in the absence of full-time jobs available, and they wanted to do business that mattered. So they wanted to take their good out into the world, and they were a bit ahead of the curve, because now we have these things called social enterprises, which are profit organizations which funnel the profit back into a scalability of being able to do more, provide more shoes, provide more food, provide more education. So Richard Branson, I like his definition of being an entrepreneur, and it really spills over almost into that spiritual side. Being an entrepreneur simply means being someone who wants to make a difference to other people's lives. And so there are 10 characteristics of an entrepreneur. So I'd like you to take a look at them. And I'm wondering if anything on here surprises you. Just take a note if anything surprises you of these 10 characteristics of being an entrepreneur. And if nothing surprises you, is there anything on there that you think, you know what, I already embody that? Is there something that really stood out? Like maybe you have market knowledge, or you're that money person, or you're the networker. So in passion and motivation, I loved seeing that, because I think that that could be any entrepreneur. And then not being afraid to take risks, because an entrepreneur is often going into areas that they wouldn't normally have gone in their previous experience. Self-belief and dedication to the cause that you're stepping into. So there's that belief system, and although we're always dealing with, a limiting belief that comes up and working through that, and that's how we know that we're still alive. That's how we know that we're human, because we're moving through things. Then remaining adaptable and flexible. The product and market knowledge didn't surprise me at all. The money management, the effective planning skills. And so when I read this, it was like, but not too much. So there can be a tendency sometimes if we're a planner, to focus on the planning, and the planning keeps us from the execution. So an entrepreneur plans enough to be able to step forward and not necessarily super concerned about it being exactly perfect before they step in, and this goes along with the taking risks. The right connections, so they're willing to get out and meet the right people. Exit preparedness was one that surprised me when I saw that. And so here's how I'm going to read that. And, I think we could think, oh, the sky is falling, always be ready for the sky to fall. What I read in exit preparedness was that I like working with people who could work anywhere because they are good at what they do and they're comfortable with what they're doing and they're choosing to be there. So I like to work with people who could work anywhere else, but they're here. And when I've worked with clients around this in career transition, or I've worked in internal environments where I step in with clients for a bit and work with people who, feel very fearful about a lack of control around what's happening in their communities, and this can be business and this can be in your congregation. Anyone who feels that something could happen that could totally shift things, like the floor could come out from underneath them, they're living in fear. So this exit preparedness, what I read that as is, I would be ready for anything because I'm okay with myself. And I think that's a common characteristic in entrepreneurs, that they sort of have that bounce factor. It's like, okay, well, if this isn't fine, and I'm going to go do this and this. And the ability to question themselves, but not too much. It's kind of like the planning, where they can question themselves, but not to go into constant spirals of deep darkness, right? There's that joke about walking through the valley of the shadow of death. And so not pitching a tent there, not buying a condo, but like walking through it is the first couple of words. It's like, keep on walking, right? So these were the 10 characteristics of an entrepreneur. And from teaching classes in business and whatnot over the years, these sounded about right from the collection that I found. Then I thought, okay, so a spiritual entrepreneur, and I had my own definition for it. So this is actually my definition. It's not a sourced definition. It's a gathering of all the things that I've been using to describe it, because since I put the promo out, people like our Dean of Deans, Dr. Kathy Hearn, and I had the great fortune and absolute terror to spend 3.5 hours in the car with Dr. Ken Gordon and Dr. Deborah on the weekend on the way to Kelowna. So, I got asked a few questions like, what's the definition? And, so I feel like I'm getting ready for panels. But what is a spiritual entrepreneur? They allow the divine to work through them to bring their good into the world. So this is an updated version of my Be the Change networking people from 10 years ago who are bringing the good into the world. And these entrepreneurs, they lead businesses and organizations and communities and initiatives to do well and to do good. So there's this dualistic view that, like, if you're doing well, then you're probably not doing good stuff. And if you're doing good, then you shouldn't make, hear the word shouldn't make so much money. So it's like these two things are separated. So it's like that seesaw of the heart and the money, doing well and doing good. And I can postulate on why we separated those things. And I don't know that we, the universal we, the big we's, separated them. But there's a lot of different schools of thought and religious schools and business schools that traditionally separate those things. So we have a lot of societal messages that lead us to have that. So it's perfectly normal that we have that. But I'd like you to keep those two ideas in mind, doing well and doing good, because they're going to show up in all of our modules. So how can you and your community do well and do good? Okay. So here's the 12 characteristics of spiritual entrepreneurs. So some might feel like the same when you look at them, like are fine with ambiguity. That sounds like flexible and able to move through risk. And I'm happy to send these, I'll send the definition and the 12 characteristics to you. Thinking big, they believe that God can, or they believe that the divine can. And what that means in this context is that everything around us that was created, everything that we create through our own God presence is always canning. It's always doing. So we know that it can happen. It's always doing. So what makes us stop and think that somehow we couldn't, right? seeing abundance, not scarcity. That goes to the money piece. And think vision first and resources second. And I love that. Now, it does say resources second. It doesn't say think only vision and the rest will show up. It's like vision first, resources second. Personal and team development, and then believing that this is bigger than them. So believing that the call, believing that your community is bigger than any one thing that you're concerned about. And they'll risk it all without guarantee of success. Now let me couch that, is that they're not looking for the guarantee of success before they decide to make the move. That they're willing to travel along with some degree of risk, not inappropriate risk, and not putting people in difficult positions or the community in a difficult situation. Never wait for consensus, number 10. And I think we could probably chat about that one, because I know a lot of consensus decision making happens in the communities. And so the context of this is that if we're in leadership, then we've been put into leadership, and the group that's been put into leadership, that the larger community wants them to make decisions and so therefore expects them. But a lot of times we'll fall back and look for complete agreement, and this will show up in the leadership styles. And then let the critics talk while they act. So hearing the buzz of people having things to say, and I can tell you, even putting together this program, there was, people were saying stuff, and I thought, I'm just going to keep going. I'm just going to do it. I'm not going to believe that it can't be done. I'm just going to do it. And here we are. And so we break some rules because of that. So these are the characteristics of spiritual entrepreneurs. So I'm going to do one more slide here, and then I'd like to flip back in here. So I mentioned intrapreneur. Intrapreneur is an employee who is inside an organization, and they're given the latitude and the freedom, and they have the expectation that they're going to be innovative and they're going to behave like an entrepreneur. So you'll see a lot of entrepreneurs in the marketing and sales and product development type sides of business, and in mergers and acquisitions, and sometimes in leadership you see this a lot too. So an entrepreneur would be saying, well, this is my endeavor that I'm doing, and an intrapreneur will be like, okay, this is my idea, we're going to run with my idea. There's a few reasons that spiritual entrepreneurs emerged, and I'm happy to send these to you as well. So there's 7 reasons. We have almost 7 generations operating in our society right now, which means they're at our centers. So I'm wondering what programming we're doing for 6 generations, right? The emerging gig economy, so this idea of non-stability in employment, this idea that a paradigm of a Sunday service would have been created at a time years ago when we had much more traditional family arrangements, much more traditional hours. So right now we're in this gig economy where many people, the vast majority of people, don't have full-time, like, I'm starting my career, going to end my career, going to do retirement and a pension. They're doing contracts and moving in and out of companies, and that's become very normal, and especially for the millennials, and they like it, and there's some great things about it. But it also creates a lack of stability or non-stability, which is not a bad thing, but we have to accept that our community is living in that. So we need to respond to that in our programming and the way that we work in our community. Globalization, so we can know things about the world pretty instantaneously right now, and other religions and structures and spiritual paths that we wouldn't have our people in our community 30, 40, 50 years ago just wouldn't have had access to that experience. A focus on diversity and inclusion generally in the world, and we heard this around the value of our centers. Improve technology tools, so you can decide to do something and then get it out there logistically so much easier than you would have 10, 20 years ago. This growing desire around the world, because of some of the previous 5 there, that we want to make a difference. And this growing need for spirituality. Inside business, I mentioned that, but just in general in the society versus religion. So that's a lot of stuff. I'm going to just pop out here. Okay. So I'm wondering what in that just pulled you in. What was worth me sharing that set of slides with you? And I'm happy to send out the list and whatnot. Who would like to make a comment here first? How about, can I ask Jeffrey to make a comment?
Yeah, there was quite a bit of information there. It was very exciting. I was looking at that and it said ship first, improve later. What did you mean by that?
I can put that in maybe a more local speak, which is don't wait for the perfect to start, you know, that the good can get going and the perfection can come. Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. How about Tammy?
I was pretty excited about how many characteristics of a spiritual entrepreneur I can call my own, and thinking, wow, maybe I'm more of an entrepreneur than I thought I was. So that's pretty awesome for me. And yeah, I also see that there are places that I could definitely work on. So I'm really excited about all of these ideas. The spiritual entrepreneur ideas are a lot more. I'm a lot more at home with them than I thought I would be. So that's a good thing. I was really concerned coming into this class that I shared with you by email that I was, pretty terrified because I have never identified myself as being an entrepreneur, and I was thinking that I was going to be, maybe completely out of my league in some way or another. And so this is really helpful for me to just feel like I am grounded in this process, and it's a good thing. So yeah, there we go.
Great, thank you. So we have time probably for another comment. Would anyone like to put something forward to the group about all that content?
I would like to add something, if I may. It was even after 20 plus years of being an entrepreneur in various fields, I guess, it's always neat for me to see a list like that, be able to just very quickly pinpoint very strong, and then definitely need improvement there. And what I think is so great is this group is so varied and has so many different things that it's bringing to the table. I'm just really, really excited to start work. So thank you.
Now, this identification as an entrepreneur. So some of us may think that in our communities, and especially if we're ministers or working in a community, that we are an employee of the community. And so I'm going to say that this entrepreneur, this employee and entrepreneur, there's a bit more of a mindset going on than anything, because all of our communities are self-funded, which makes you the entrepreneur, by the way. As the leader or part of the leadership team, you are just de facto in an entrepreneurial role. Except sometimes we don't think of it that way, and we begin to think that because we're paid a salary that we're an employee. Or we might every once in a while act entrepreneurial, like stand up and lead something, or put out an initiative, or you're responsible for marketing and really it lands with you anyways because the bottom line lands with you and the check signing lands with you. And so you may feel entrepreneurish now that you know that that terminology. But if we feel that we are employees, we lose access to the expectation within ourselves to be innovative. And I don't mean from ego. I do not mean from ego at all. I mean, it's a viewpoint. And when you see what entrepreneurial means, I think we see that we're more entrepreneurial, like Tammy said, than we are. And Tammy, you and Steph have been entrepreneurial from day one. I got to tell you, I'm breaking it to you right now, but you've been paving a way. It's been 100% you folks, really. And so whether we step into a community that exists or whether we begin from the beginning, we only get paid if the community is doing well. That's very entrepreneurial-ish. Gotta say it. Okay. So for the purpose of the program, we'll embrace as much over on the entrepreneurial side as we can, and I think you'll begin to see things resonating as we move forward. So I'm going to go back to sharing. I have a question for you, and so I'd like you to grab your pen and paper here. Getting used to my new computer. This is your big why. So now that we found out that we might be more entrepreneurial than we thought, I'd like you to, just for a moment, and close your eyes if you need to, just think back, just in a reflection moment here. What was your big why in coming into the role that you're in? Because you're all here from some driving force, from a very heart-centered, heart-spaced place. So remember back when you received the call to be what you are today in your community, whether you're a volunteer, whether you're a minister, whether you're a practitioner, there was a moment when you were called. And so what was that about? What were you planning to do with this call? Probably comes up in like 3 to 5 words. It's just a sentence, really. It's really pretty straightforward when that lands. And I just want you to remember that for a moment. So just write that down. So before you had the whiny congregant, before you had to be concerned about checks and a clean bathroom at the center, and before you had to manage MailChimp, and before you had to put out promotions, before any of this. Do you remember what you were going to do? What were you going to do? So just take note of that. So I'd like to translate that from what that was now into something that we're going to start to work on called your mission. And this is going to show up in the strategic planning piece. And so don't worry today about getting a final anything. And it's not a mission statement and it's not formal. So if your heart's beating fast because you think you're going to do something really businessy, just stop. We're going to look at being and doing. And I always make a joke about Amit Goswami, Professor Amit Goswami's class in quantum physics, and he talks about the do, right? And so in your mission, in fulfilling your why that you've been fulfilling, there's a being part of that likely, and there's a doing part of that. So just take note for a moment, whatever you need to recall here, the thoughts that come up around being. What does my role bring to my community? What am I being? Who am I being in my community? And that is generally not your title. It's like I'm being the communicator. I'm being the mama. I'm being the guardian. I'm being the non-codependent person. I'm being the business person. I'm being the bridge builder. So whatever it is that you're being in your community right now. And then because you're being that, what is it that you're doing? So what is the importance of the work that you're doing? Think about what you're doing. So in being the leader, I'm doing the following things. And this might not be happening if I wasn't there. Kind of like how if your community wasn't in its, if your congregation community wasn't in your local community, these things wouldn't be happening. If you weren't at your center in exactly your role, whatever your role is, then this stuff wouldn't be getting done. The doing wouldn't be happening. So you're going to put something together between now and the next module in October around this simplified mission statement for me incorporated. So you can go back to the wording that you have here and you're going to come up with something kind of informal, like it is my mission to be by doing. And so when you write that down and express it as a current experience and sit with that for a bit, you may decide that you like it. You may decide to sit in it. You may decide that you want to shift it or up-level it. You may decide that you want to do something parallel to it. It'll be yours to decide. So it's my mission to be by doing. Okay. And then going back to this idea of doing good and doing well, I'd like you just to make a couple of notes about your community, and then we're going to go off into your own assessments that you did as homework. So what is your community doing? And how is your community doing good? And how is your community doing well? So we talked about that balance of spirituality and money. And so when you look at your community, 2 or 3 things that your community is doing and you're doing good by doing them. So this might be things that you're making a difference on in your inside your congregate community or out in your geographical community. How is your community doing good? Like, we're really doing good at these things. And that might be, for some people, it might be we're really doing really good administration. And then secondly, how is your community doing well? So in terms of financially doing well, what area inside your community is doing well? So maybe you've got rentals, maybe you've got programming, maybe you've got donations. Where are you doing well? And come back to the group here and just ask if there's any questions about this information that we just took down. Did anything surprise you about where your community is doing good or doing well? Was this a new idea of looking at your community from a doing well and doing good perspective, like separating that out? And thinking of how we can do well and how we can do good, and that they can actually play together. Did anyone find that difficult? Was that a yes, Tammy? Am I seeing a yes?
Yeah, that's a yes for me.
Okay.
The whole thing I need to think about a little bit more and figure out where we are doing good and where we're doing well. That's yeah.
There's always some things in this to celebrate. And then once we acknowledge what we're doing, it opens the space for, okay, now what do we want to do more of? Do we want to do more like this or more different, you know? So it's a neat place to be, and you can even use it in a gratitude practice, but really looking at what needs to shift. So this module is partly about you folks, but then your community, it's intrinsic. So it's all attached. It's hard to talk about your community without talking about you, right? Yeah. Okay. So I'd like you to grab your self-assessment. Okay. So in your self-assessment, you had the 1 to 10 scale, and so you were circling the items from 1 to 10, with 10 being high and 1 being low. So everyone has their document? Okay. I'd like you to take the document, and then I'd like you to turn it on its side so that you end up with a chart, like a bar graph. Okay, got it? Okay, so now you can visually see the things that are higher and the things that are lower. So you can visually see it as a horizontal document. So what I'd like you to do is just take a moment and take a look at those. And I'd like you to circle or asterisk or however you want to do it. You're not handing this in. If there were 3 that you could get some movement on in this particular program, what would they be? So go ahead and pick your 3. Okay. Does everyone have their 3? Okay. So once you have your 3, I'd like you to number them 1, 2, 3. Like number 1 would be the most important thing to get some movement on. Number 2, then number 3. Okay. And so I'd like you to call out your number 1, the thing that you want to get the most movement on. Okay. So Alan, I'll mute you. Which is the one for you?
Service outreach in the local community.
Okay, great. Lasia, I'll unmute you. Or maybe I won't.
Here we go. Participation in local interfaith council.
Okay, great. Stephanie?
Community money consciousness.
Money consciousness, okay. Teresa?
The overall congregants experience.
Okay. Tammy?
Community money consciousness.
Okay. Jeffrey?
Community money consciousness.
Okay. And we have Leslie on here, but I have a feeling that they're doing their filming, so I won't expect her to respond back. Okay. So I'd like you to hold that document because we're going to work on it with the strategic planning piece. And so if there's anything that you want to go back and take a look at with that between now and when we meet in October, then keep that one aside. And then I'd like you to pull out your entrepreneurial values document. So I gave you up to 10. You could have up to 10 of those values selected. Okay. So I'd like you to do something similar. With your 10 values, I'd like you to choose 3 that you feel you must absolutely be able to embody and embrace, that you absolutely want expressed in your role as spiritual entrepreneur, the community leader in whatever facet of the role that you do in your community as a leader. So what are the 3 of the 10 that must remain? You can't be removed. And then I'd like you to do the same. What's your number 1 there? So you got 3 values. List them 1, 2, 3. It's a toughie. Sometimes there's a tie. Okay. And so once again, I'd just like you to shout out the top value that must remain. Reverend Jeffrey?
Integrity.
Integrity. Tammy?
Oh, that's a tough one. I'm going to say love.
Love. Okay. Teresa?
Spirituality.
Okay. Alan?
Service.
Okay. Stephanie?
Empowerment.
Empowerment. Okay. Last but not least, Lasia.
I put success.
Okay. Great. Great. I don't think we had a duplicate. We didn't duplicate anything, did we? Oh, okay. Wonderful. Wonderful. That is a very normal experience. We're all coming at it from really different places. Okay. So what I'd like you to do, and I'll send you this in a homework document, is the 3 values that you have. You get to keep those as your 3 values as a spiritual entrepreneur only if you can come up with 3 ways for each of them that you can make them actionable. So love. These are the 3 actions that I do, the 3 things I do that I know I am meeting my value of love in the community. Okay? Success. These are the 3 things that I can do, okay, that tell me that I'm meeting my value of success. So when I work with organizations that do strategic planning and they have these values, I call them the Las Vegas marquee lights. They're way up high and they don't touch us. They don't ask anything of us. Jeffrey, I've been using this for years, even before I knew you and Laura. So I would say, like, they just don't touch you. They don't ask anything up there, and they're nice and far away from you. So, you know, you don't have to really kind of look at them very nice. But then when you do, they're bright and it's lovely, right? So when you take them down and hold them in your hands, they're kind of hot because they're lights. And it should feel that way. So it should feel like you can describe your values. So the way it plays out in organizations is that leaders will choose these lovely values and then can't tell their employees how to live them. But then they show up on their performance reviews at the end of the year. So I created these rules. These are Sonia Byrne consulting rules. You can't have a value unless you can tell me. And corporately, I say 5 ways. So I'm taking it easy on you guys. So 3, okay? So 3 actions for each of your 3, okay? And then I'd like you to line that up against what you want to do in the factors of your self-assessment that you want to move the dial on. And figure out, you know, which ones of these will help me over here, and maybe do I need to look at something else. So there should be a connection. You should be able to put those together. There often is, because the values that you've chosen are often exactly what you need to move that dial. So how can these values serve me? And if the value isn't serving you, then you might need to go back and take a look at one of your other 10 and say, well, this is the one that serves me. But I can't say it's going to serve me unless I can tell Sonia 3 ways that I'm going to do it. Okay, I know there's the teacher in me, sorry. There's the Canadian in me, sorry. Yes, okay. So let's look at our leading and deciding sheet. So I didn't let anyone off the hook with this one. You have the different ways of being a leader. So we have, let me pull this up. I'm pulling it up on another screen here. So we have all the different leadership styles. So I put 5 in here that are really quite different. And I would like to know which one you found easy to explain how you, an example of how you use it, and which one was hard. So I'm going to open the mic and we'll say, it was easy for me to describe this one, and it was difficult for me to find an example of this one. Tammy, how about you go first?
Man, I knew you were going to show or ask me first. Okay, so the one I found difficult was delegation, and mainly because within our community is so small, there is nobody to delegate to.
Okay, and the easy one?
And the easy one, I'm going to say halfway between directive and collaborative. But I kind of had a caveat on that one, because it's directive and it's collaborative. Between Steph and I, we're the ones that tend to be the doers of the community, and so we collaborate with each other. We take on centralized sort of decision-making areas within, and then we share the authority to make the decisions, or we defer to the person who has the greater knowledge. So it's kind of,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a question for you. Have you shared that page with Steph?
Yes, we did this one together because I wasn't willing to look at it on my own.
Okay, thank you. I was just curious, because sharing it with your co-leader can make it a whole lot easier or a whole lot more muddy. Just depends. So something's going to flesh out for you. You're the one in the program, but you know she'll have the information too. But it'll be interesting to see how that evolves for you. How about we hear from Stephanie? Stephanie, the easy one and the difficult one.
The easy one actually was delegation, because when I create youth curriculum, for at least 2 of the 4 weeks. That is what I give to the volunteers, and that's they do it. They don't want it to be any messier than that. They just say, okay, great, thanks, I'll do it. But then the hard one, I don't have anything for directive or consensus. I don't really direct anything. It seems like, I don't tell anybody, I'm going to change my mind in the middle of this. So.
Okay. How about for you, Alan?
Both directive and consensus were difficult because I don't think we really do things that way at CSL. Collaborative is, I think, the closest way from my perspective. And I'm not the decision maker, but that is our model.
Okay. And Teresa, how about for you? What did you come up with that?
So participatory, I like a lot because I like to get people together and generate ideas, and I get a lot of energy from that.
Mm-hmm.
But I can also be very directive. Like if I have it, if I lock into idea and it's like, yeah, I see it. It's like, all right, let's go. And I'm also happy to delegate. I love it when I can delegate. So I like to create ideas and then come up with stuff and then move on. I'm not so much of the long-term doer.
Okay, thank you. Lesia?
For me, collaborative was the one that just felt the most natural and the easiest, and the one I like the best, feel most comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
And then in this particular situation with, I'm going to say CSL Victoria, consensus. It's there are way too many mini groups who want different things and have a tough time communicating with each other, and it's a challenge. It's a challenge.
Okay, and Reverend Jeffrey?
Collaborative was the easiest one. That's the one that's the one I gravitate toward. And then for me too, consensus was the most difficult one, because I find that it's been my experience anyway that in order to really do consensus, you have to have people operating on a very similar level of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're not operating on a very similar level of consciousness, then stuff gets hijacked. And then it's just like, no, my ego's in charge and I say no, so I'm going to stop the whole process. And so that is not one. I will only do consensus with like Reverend Laura and Reverend Colleen. Like, it's just like, and Sonia. But, it's like, that's like, I have a small group that I'm willing to do consensus with. And it's a trusted group of people that I would do consensus with. But otherwise.
A spiritual hijacking.
Yes, or just ego hijacking is what it's not even spiritual. It's
even stronger than a bypass. It's a hijacking.
It's a hijacking. Yeah. That's actually the word I used in the description. Was like
hijacking.
Yep.
Hijacking. Okay. Yeah. It's interesting to be hijacked by just such well-intentioned, meaning heart-centered people, and still hijacking. So the last thing that I'm going to ask us to do with this particular piece of information around the leadership piece, and so this will show up again, but I'd like you to document there for yourself a past, present, future concept. So in the past at your center or organization, what has been the primary leadership and decision-making style? What is the present? They might be the same, they might be different. And then in order to bring your organization into the future and do the good things that need to be done in spiritual entrepreneurship and community, what is the leadership style that's going to help move your group there? So past style, present style, future style. Just document that for yourself in this moment. And this is another thing to sort of refrain from editing. Just let the first thing come up. Past style, present style, future style. Okay. So I'm going to have us wind down at this point. That was a lot of information and a great introduction. I'll let you know that I will send you the recording. I'll send you some information I promise, the lists and the homework pieces that can help prepare you for the strategic planning session, which is the next one, which is October 25th. So, yeah. And what I would like you to think about, and we're going to start with this next time, so I will send it out to you, is supporting in our group. So I'm going to send out a question. During this spiritual entrepreneurship program, I can offer the following support to my colleagues. So if anyone wants to ask about this, or if there's something that I'm kind of known for, I'd like to put that out there. And then during the program, I request support in the following area. So if anybody has a specialty in this or this, here's something that I'd love to have some support in. So I just want to put that together for our group. So we'll start with that piece next time. So just as a reminder, you have the 3 handouts that you have with your additional notes on there, looking at the 3 assessment factors and what might a higher number, what might a 10 look like in those, and then you are also going to take your values, and you've got your 3 values and how to bring those to life, and figuring out, where can those 2 things intersect, how can they help each other. And we will review that mission piece too, like that I am being and I'm doing, so my mission of me incorporated. So we're going to begin to kind of put together your mission of spiritual entrepreneurship. So we're just going to get started, and that's going to change over some time. Okay. And then this recent note here of the leadership styles and the past, present, future. That will be interesting to ensure that what we believe is the future style that's required continues to show up in the work that we do around building strategic plan, customer service, money, conflict, etc. Okay. Well, that was quite a bit to get started on, actually, but I feel like we're in a pretty decent place. So I want to open the floor here. Is there anything that you would like to ask, or any comments that you'd like to make before we wind down? I want to give people an opportunity here just to finish up.
Sonia, I need to get going right now. I've got another call that I've got to be on right away. So I'm going to say goodbye, and lovely to meet everybody. And I look forward to next month.
See you then. It's October 25th. I'll send a reminder as well.
Okay, perfect.
Thanks, Tammy. Okay, any other comments or questions before we wind down? No?
Just thank you. I mean, this has been really wonderful. So, thank you for putting it together. And I knew the material was going to be amazing. And then there's already just the questions that you asked about the values, and then holding us accountable to those values and the action items around those values, I think is really important. And then it's also something I'm going to take back to my community, especially my leadership team, right away about, what are our values and how are we fulfilling those values, and and doing the 5. I think that's going to be a really powerful exercise for us to do as we continue forward in our own strategic planning. So I'm super excited about that. So thank you. It's valuable to what I'm taking right now to,
Thank you. Yeah. I hear you have an awesome person assisting with your strategic planning process, actually.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
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 Love you.
You're welcome. Okay.
It's Sonia, by the way, in case anybody's who that person might be. That would be Sonia.
Another characteristic of spiritual entrepreneur, we're also humble.
Yes.
Exactly. Okay. Let's just close it out. Just our 30-second goodbye here. Let's just fold it inward if you want to close your eyes. And just in gratitude for this time we spent together, and for everyone in community who is here right now and who will see us and witness this experience later. And thank you for coming along this process with us tonight and moving through some material here that is evaluative, reflective, can be a little intense, and might be seeing some things for the first time. So we know that it sets a real great foundation and real basis for us to step forward into all the good that is unfolding already, and more of which is about to unfold. And so I call this complete, and so it is.
So it is.
You said process. Oh my God.
I know, I'm trying to be bilingual.